Let's start the AI summary. And we'll just turn the captions on just because we can for accessibility. Um, so welcome everybody. This is week 5. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here into the course. Um, so actually, before we go into week 5, I want to go back real quick and look at week 4 outro because I saw somebody put something on there. So if y'all remember last week, we went over kind of the intro to this standard, um, which is about relevant and inclusive course materials. This week, we are taking a deeper dive, and we will have a special guest, um, an expert in this type of thing, talk to us later about uh, identifying human bias and acknowledging stereotypes in particular. So, but for the week 4, I saw in here, I know it was a reflection, and sometimes reflections can be private, but Derek is willing to share his thoughts on this topic here of relevant and inclusive course materials. And so if you go in there into the link to your e-portfolio, he put a nice link here to his e-portfolio. I feel like his should start coming along here. Yeah, he's got 1.1 D, E, and F on here. And then he's got the 1.2. So they're putting that portfolio together looking real nice. Shout out to Derek. A special shout out to all the people that are new here today. Thank you all for coming in and taking the time on this Friday. All right, so this week topic, like I said, getting a little bit more into detail about bias and stereotypes. Um, look at this. Positive representations and I'll never know what the end is. I'm sure I have it somewhere. Our weekly outcome here, ensure positive representation in your course materials and foster awareness of biases or biases to create an inclusive learning environment. So we're still in that uh, section 1 of the Washington checklist where we're talking about belonging and inclusive. So real quick, before we jump into that though, the CPTC connection for this week is responsibility. So we've been going through the 4 college-wide learning outcomes. Responsibility is one that I think is pretty big. And then we'll save this for the end, I think, if there's time at the end, because I want to make sure to give our guests their due time. I don't want them to be rushing, but I would say relating to this representation, positive representation, inclusivity is kind of our responsibility as instructors. And I mean, it's mostly stuff that we've talked about already. But yeah, like I said, we'll try to see if we have some time at the end to talk about that. Our alignment today, critical thinking, I would say would be more responsibility, but critical thinking maybe towards these other indicators here. So is the representation positive? Are you identifying the human bias? Are you acknowledging stereotypes? So that's what I would say for that critical thinking. Lead students in supervised learning environments. We'll look at that. And then relevant and inclusive course materials is our course learning outcome for this one. Make sure you pay attention, or when I give you all the code word, give it to you at a random time during the meeting so that you can get credit for being here. And I think that is all that I have to say up top. Before I pass it over, does anybody have anything that they want to say? I wasn't able to go through and check everybody's uh, submissions this week. If you haven't heard, we have a big AI Institute that started this morning and goes on tomorrow, if anybody wasn't able to make it today. And if anybody was able to make it today, maybe you would be happy to come tomorrow. I can give you information about that at the end if you want. All right. I think I'm going to switch over. Uh, our special guest today is Luke Ruiz, who is the director of the Mosaic Center. What's your title?
Oh yeah, we can go with that for today.
All right, sounds
I mean, pretty
good.
much that's why people know me as like working at the Mosaic Center and serving our students here.
There we go. All right, well, I'm gonna go on mute and let you do your thing.
Yeah, thank you, Ronald. Yeah, sorry my camera's looking really red today. I don't know what's going on. Um, well, thank you for allowing me to be here and inviting me into this space. I was, yeah, chatting with Ronald during one of our committee meetings, and he asked if I can help present and be part of this group. So I said yes, and wanted to lead y'all through some of the material today. Let me go ahead and get my materials up, actually. Um, yeah, so we'll be talking about implicit bias today. And stereotypes. That's the main content I have for you, given our time together. And so just want to dive into this, talk a little bit about it. I have some examples. I know that y'all are faculty and you engage students. So just as you engage students, I hope to engage y'all. And hopefully, yeah, you have some good takeaways from this, learn something interesting. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions as we move through it. I'm happy to pause and talk about anything in particular. So yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So I want to start with a quick warm up before we jump into all of this content. I like a good warm up brainstorm. So let's go ahead and, if you have a piece of paper or a writing utensil of some sort, it can be whatever you want, crayon, pen, pencil, chalk. So I have four things. You can make a quadrant. You don't have to make them this color. This is just for my color schemes. Um, but if you want to take the next couple minutes, just do a quick draw and a write. So in each quadrant, draw the respective thing I have for you. So if you can draw a tree in one of the quadrants, write an equation in another, draw a music note in the bottom one, and then draw a tool in the far right one. So if you can just take a minute to do that. Hopefully you have something available to you, like a notepad or scratch piece of paper. And if when you're done, just go ahead and give me a thumbs up or just pop it in the chat to say I finished, just so I know where everybody's at today. Hey, Dawn, I see you have a thumbs up. Thank you. All right, Chris, I see you gave me a thumbs up too. Thanks for letting me know. Oh, Ronald, I see you gave me a thumbs up on the screen, and Trish as well, and Kelly as well. Okay, cool. Just maybe a couple more people are wrapping up. I don't know who iPhone is, and I think we have Jasmine and Kristen left for this activity because I have part one and then part two after. This will connect later to what we're going to do. So I want to make sure you have this available to you as we move through today. All right, thanks, Jasmine. I can clean my screen because I don't know why I'm so orange red today. Oh, there we go. Something must have been on my camera. All right, thanks, Christian. Okay, so keep that, just keep that aside, put that on the, on the side of your desk or wherever you're at today. And then for the second part, if you have another part of that paper or if you have another scrap piece of paper, I have part two for you. So this next part is I want to go ahead and get our brains moving too. So I have like a drawing activity and then I also have a text activity. So I love a good word association and I hope, yeah, it always brings up something different every time I do this activity. So when I flip to the next part of the screen, I have 10 different words available for you. And so go ahead and make a list 1 through 10. And on that list, you're just going to write real quick what comes to your mind. Don't linger too long about it. Um, so, for instance, if I have the first word speaker, maybe what comes to mind for me is speaker of the house. Like that, I'm just going to write that real quick. Or if I have another one and it says ice, and maybe the next thing is cream. So ice cream is like the association I'm making. So there's a list of 10 words. Go ahead and write them out. And then again, similarly, once you have your 10 words with your associations next to them, just go ahead and give me a thumbs up and we'll go from there. So let's go ahead and go to the next screen. So here's your 10 words. Go ahead and list them 1 through 10 and just write the first word that comes to your mind in association with each of these words. And it shouldn't take too long, maybe just a few minutes. Okay, Don, I see you give me a thumbs up. Thanks. Looks like got some more people jumping in too. Perfect. For those who just joined, we're just doing a quick word association. If you have a piece of paper next to you, you can write 1 through 10 and just write the first word that you associate with each of these words on the screen. So number one, put your word. Number two, put your word. Number three, put your word, and so on and so forth. I'm starting to get some thumbs up. Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Are we sharing these with everybody or are we just keeping them to ourselves for now?
Yes, so for this part, I'm just gonna go ahead and put it in so we can start going on that activity. So I have a Padlet for everybody to contribute to. It's in the chat, so if you want to check that out, I can share screen real quick of what that looks like. Um, so I have a Padlet available for us today. It's each of the words, if you scroll on the bottom, you can get to the next one. So all you need to do is just, yep, exactly like this. You can press the plus button, write your word in here, and press publish. And so just go ahead and put each of your words into this little plus symbol, and each one should get its own. So yeah, we should start seeing these populate. I'll go back to the other screen real quick so people can see um, the word association that I had. Yeah, I see more people joining in. Great. I think I have how many people on the Padlet right now? Just says 3 plus. But yeah, go ahead and populate it. I think we have how many people on the call today? up to 10, including me, so maybe 9 participants. So I'll probably see like nine responses on each of our different categories. And if we were in person, I'd pretty much do a similar activity where we have it on butcher paper and we write out all of our stuff on a list on the butcher paper. But yeah, let's go ahead and get these populated as we move through. All right, I'm seeing some good responses. I always like seeing what y'all put in for each of our things. I'm starting to see it um, slow down a little bit, so I'll go ahead and keep moving. And I encourage you to look at the responses too on the Padlet. It's y'all have access to this, and you can see the live typing as we move forward. But it's so interesting seeing what comes up in regard to our word association. I'm just gonna throw it out there before I give y'all my answers. Why do you think I started our session today with this word association and asked you to do this quick activity? You could either
I
put
have an
it,
idea, unless
yeah,
somebody wants to jump in.
yeah, I was gonna say you can either unmute or just put in the chat, whatever you feel most comfortable.
The the word association kind of illustrates our bias, right? Like what we think about when we hear something. So it seems like everybody, when they hear red writing, puts hood. But if you look, I'm looking over here at Lord. When you say Lord or Pacific, everybody's got their own kind of idea on what that should be, their own bias, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought I'd start with something a little bit more low stakes to say. And Ronald, yeah, you got it just right on the head. Yeah, before I get into implicit bias, this is, yeah, something I find so interesting every time I bring it to a different group and just start this activity like this, because I think implicit bias brings up a lot of emotion. It brings up a kind of some uneasiness sometimes or some nervousness. And I thought to start it like this because it really shows in a very matter of fact way how our brains are literally wired. It shows that through our associations of how we're raised in this context of the United States and also within this context of the Northwest, we are trained for more or less like how these words are associated. So bumblebee, I think, came up a lot. Yeah, Red Riding Hood. I think everybody on this call has heard that story. So based on, our educational system we grew up in, the families we're a part of, the stories we've heard, somehow or another, we've all heard the story of Red Riding Hood. And similar for peanut butter, I think that also had a bunch of different or all similar responses. But as we move forward, I thought I'd throw some like different ones in there. And specifically, like if you go all the way to the end, like Pacific, and for this group, I put in Clover because I wanted to see how our context and how our language has been pretty much ingrained in us as we have been here at the college either a short amount of time or for a number of years. So Clover Park Technical College, a bunch of them, Clover Park, and then Technical College spelled out the whole way. But some different ones as far as like Pacific Ocean, Pacific Rim, Pacific Northwest, Islander. These are all different ones that I think are starting to get at some other contexts in which we're a part of. So even although we're right here today as people on this Zoom call, we have a lot of similarities of the language we've been associated with for years and years. And also we come from different backgrounds and different cultures, different race ethnicities, different parts of the US, different parts of the world. So depending on how that shows up, I think that's also showing up in some language and how we're interpreting language and how we're associating it. And so it's so interesting seeing this just, a very simple thing, because that's literally how our brains are wired psychologically, like, and it's meant that way. So, back in the day when our brains were forming and making associations, we used to tell from like right or wrong or good or bad or harm or safety. And so as we have grown more complex, our brains create these shortcuts of words and even actions. So we can spend our other parts of our brain making more complex ideas, complex actions, complex decision making. So we don't have to think about these small associations like cheddar, cheese, and teddy and bear, since those are pretty easy. And we don't have to spend that much energy and brain power thinking about these associations. But the other part, I wanted just to give y'all a quick definition as we move into implicit bias. What does that look like? And I want to specifically think about, although these are like very low risk, there's not too much harm associated with these words like cheddar or peanut butter or Romeo and Juliet or Romeo Alpha. Like there's not too much like harm associated with these. And so I want to put a distinction of like there's when it starts to get a little bit more um when it starts to have more complexity and more issues associated with them is when we start associating these words with social identities. And so just as we've put together our put together associations with each of these words, we've also been wired to have associations with race, with gender, with socioeconomic status, with ethnicity, and to name a few of our social identities that we hold. And so I think we need to watch out when it starts getting associated with our social identities and what that looks like. And so, yeah, that's just how our brains work is like we make quick connections, quick associations. And unfortunately, we've come to have bias and stereotypes associated with certain types of, oh, we got some secret code of the week. Okay, I see you, Ronald. So yeah, race, ethnicity, age, appearance, there's all different types of associations we've been wired to think about. And some of them are, um, in our brains internally, and they come out in very different ways. So yeah, this is the definition I work off of from the Kirwan Institute. And yeah, hopefully, you've had a chance to read through that as I've talked a little bit more about my um, word association and how that has been connected to implicit bias. And hopefully, as we started the conversation, that was a really easy way just to show like this exists and this is just how our brains work. And hopefully, as we move through, we can be more conscious of how we navigate the classroom, how we navigate environments in our educational systems, and in everyday life. It doesn't just have to be at Clover Park. All right, so let's go ahead and keep moving forward. So implicit bias, this is why we're here today. I want to switch over. I have a video for y'all today. Give me a sec. And actually, this video really inspired my activity with the word association because I really thought that was a really interesting way to start implicit bias. So let me go ahead and switch over. Um, and if it's having any issues, just let me know in the chat, Ronald.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
I can hear it.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias? Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes those shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there's an overrepresentation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that Black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race and exploring ways we might combat the problem. One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
All right, so I thought this video was interesting, and this has really got the peanut butter jelly just to open up the conversation today and talk about implicit bias, of how our brains work, and literally wired to make associations. I'm going to go ahead and drop this in the chat. I know it's nice to have video resources. There's other ones on the bottom. Let me see. If you are so interested, this is just like video one. There's other videos that go along with it. So there's more to dive in if you're interested in that. And Ronald, you're more than welcome to posting me that on your shell, your Canvas shell. So just wanted to share that resource there. Okay. So the other part, I know, man, time goes fast today. Let me go back to my screen. So, implicit bias. So I just want to show some keywords and characteristics of what that looks like, so you can have some takeaway pieces of that. And I try to pull out some keywords as well within each of the bullet points, so you can see what I'm talking about when I I'm explaining implicit bias. So that they're pervasive, and I think through the video it showed it's throughout our whole life. We're fed all kinds of different messages, like I said, from the media to your educational systems to your friends to your families. It's all reinforced in one way or another. So they're pervasive. They're related but not distinct to mental constructs. And so we'll get to mental constructs in a bit with the drawing I just had y'all make. But it's like how you come to know and make sense of the world around you, and how it's a whole nother lecture for mental constructs. The third and fourth bullet point I think are pretty interesting, because we can hold implicit bias associations that do not necessarily align with our declared beliefs or even things we reflect or endorse. Like, we can say that racism is bad. I'm not racist, or I'm trying to be anti-racist. But in reality, when we move through the world, there may be times of which our biases and stereotypes creep up. And that's when it's important to acknowledge that, check in with that, and then kind of disrupt it, if that makes sense. And it's a practice. It's not like one day you'll achieve, your bias and stereotypes being abolished. It's a matter of like being in constant how do I describe it? Constant practice, constant man, my words are escaping me today on a Friday. But just, it's a constant practice of checking your bias, checking your stereotypes, even though if we don't agree with certain things. And they're malleable. So our brains are complex, and as new associations can be formed. So as we move, through the day, today, after Friday, and into the weekend, we can create new relationships, new associations with these words. And that's why I put that word clover into that first association, because even before I came to Clover Park Technical College, I would have never made that association. I think Clover Park would have been another type of association. So as we move through different points of our life, our brains could be malleable to make different connections and hopefully for more positive outcomes. So those are just some key characteristics of implicit bias. Um, any questions about these? Because I think this is a good chunk of what I want to share with y'all right here, as far as like keywords and stuff coming up. And then my question for you is, what examples of implicit bias come to mind? Let me see if I can find my video controls now so I can see y'all.
Would being a Seattle Seahawks fan by living in this area your whole life count as implicit bias?
I would say in relation to what? So
Like in relation to like they're the best football team, thinking that they're the best football team over any other football team?
yeah, I would say that's okay. I would even say like association would be like Seattle Seahawks with the number 12.
Mm,
And I
yeah.
would think even before I moved to this area, to Tacoma, I never had that association with the word 12 or the number 12 and the Seahawks.
Mm.
So I was thinking in relation to what? Like what group or what word in relation to another piece? Yeah, and I think that also gets to your point, like they're the best. The 12th man, you know. What other examples? Maybe I'll get one more and then I'll move forward. More on this Friday afternoon.
No, he's not gonna go unless we think of one. Kristen?
Kristen, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, mine is not superficial though. So that's a I was I don't know. I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, feel free to go as
Well, okay, so my mom is really scared of water, and she really tried hard not to be that way around me, but I think I absorbed it anyway. And so anytime I'm by an ocean or a lake or anything like that, like I have this like it's dangerous will come up, and that so my bias is that like without even thinking I'm negative toward like any kind of water anything, so maybe that's kind of implicit bias, maybe a little bit, I don't know.
yeah, even maybe at times explicit bias to be like
Right.
any kind
Yeah.
of water, bad. Water
Yeah.
equals bad. Yeah, water equals dangerous. Yeah, thank you, Ronald. Yeah, that's definitely a type of bias for sure. Both explicit and implicit. And those things can be trained too, you know, as you move forward through your life, as especially if that's been formed as a young person and those connections are more hardwired as a young person, those tend to stay with you longer throughout your life. And on that last bullet point, they're malleable. I mean, that's going to take, you know, some work to untrain your brain in that way, and maybe some like, you know, different physical things you need to do with water, but that's a good example. Okay, let's go ahead and keep moving. I think this is another I wanted to, yeah, my question is, what do we do next? But this is I think an interesting little comic I pulled out because I think about like teaching and exams and instruction, and you can see the instructor right here. For a fair selection, everybody has to take the same exam. Please climb that tree. And if you see everybody, his students, quote unquote, assuming it's all the same, they all have the same abilities. And so there's like an underlying piece of like ability and disability within this comic that I thought was interesting to bring up. But that's, you know, there's so many ways that the classroom environment is built or how we've shaped it and how we assume students interact with our classroom environment. That we need to check ourselves. We need to check ourselves that is this appropriate or is it safe? Is it accessible for all of our students who move through our classrooms? And I know I'm getting over time, so I had one more video, but I think I'm going to skip it for now. because I want to bring back.
We got time. We have until the end of the hour, and I'm
Oh,
just
okay.
gonna go over the stuff that we should be working on this week. So take your
Okay.
time.
Sweet. Thank you. Okay, so I will do my one more video. So I kind of started that piece of like, we all have bias, and I didn't want to leave y'all with like a doom and gloom, like it's all going to be bad and we're all going to be, moving through the space like unhelpful. But I have, yeah, one other video I wanted to share with y'all that I thought was interesting of like, okay, we acknowledge we have bias, we acknowledge that stereotypes exist, and it's more of like, what do we do next? What do we do when we check ourselves? So kind of like this comic with the professor, and he's like, well, maybe he says this and he administers the exam, and then in reflection, he's like, well, that was maybe not the best approach. So it's like, what do we do next as we move into the next class, as we move into the next quarter, as we move into the next school year? Fall quarter is coming up pretty soon, so that's kind of a refresh moment. We get to start a whole new school year. So let me go ahead and switch over real quick. Okay, let me go ahead and hit play.
The unconscious mind is amazing. It can process vastly more information than our conscious mind by using shortcuts based on our background, cultural environment, and personal experiences to make almost instantaneous decisions about everything around us. The snag is, it's wrong quite a lot of the time, especially on matters that need rational thinking. Here's a classic example. A bat and a ball cost £1 10 pence. If the bat costs £1 more than the ball, how much does the ball cost? Most people, including over 50% of students at some of the world's leading universities, get the answer wrong and say 10 pence. The answer is actually 5 pence. Many of us choose 10 pence without thinking. This is because our unconscious mind uses instinct, not analysis. So our unconscious is fallible. It's also biased. It makes snap judgments of people we meet, categorizing them according to gender, social and other characteristics. In milliseconds, we judge whether somebody is like us and belongs to our in-group. These are the people we favor. So men might favor men, while women might favor women. However, we can belong to different in-groups, and we like to be part of an in-group that's powerful, which could mean a woman favoring a man over a woman. That's unconscious bias. All of us have it, and it colors our decisions without our realizing. For example, research reveals that if I were a man, you would be more likely to be nodding in agreement right now, because people pay more attention to a male voice. The Royal Society fosters excellence in science, but this can only be achieved if we select from the widest range of talent. And that's not possible if unconscious bias is narrowing down the field for non-scientific reasons. To lessen the impact of unconscious bias, which is easier for us to notice in others, we are raising the awareness of unconscious bias to members of our selection and appointment panels. We're encouraging panel members to deliberately slow down decision-making, reconsider reasons for decisions, question cultural stereotypes, and monitor each other for unconscious bias. We can't cure unconscious bias, but with self-awareness, we can address it.
Right. It was a quick video. And Ronald, I saw you were getting that math question. I literally had to pause it when I saw this for the first time, and I was like, wait.
Pounds from one doctor.
I was like, let me slow down and
Yeah, I was like,
get this question right.
how does it get? And then I was like, more than I get it now.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and I put the video in the chat too, for you to include on your Canvas shells. So
Thank you.
yeah, so you can have these available. Yeah, I had to pull up some some algebra and calculus for that one. Okay. Yeah, feel free to check that out again. And I watched it a couple times, and every time I watch, I'm like, okay, then they talk pretty fast and they have a lot of illustrations, so it's nice to like slow it down and check each piece out as it moves forward. But what I liked about that video is the last slide I had. So let me see this one right here. So encouraging panel members to deliberately slow down decision making, number one. So don't rush to anything. Don't just have snap judgments based on, class materials, ways of addressing conduct or addressing like classroom behaviors, things like that. So slow down the decisions making, reconsider reasons for decisions. So how one thing was handled in one quarter, does it have to be the same in the next quarter? Questions cultural stereotypes. There's all kinds of different bias that we have with different stereotypes. And I think one that has been recent for me is like hearing the narrative of like immigrants and especially people from Latin America coming to, the US, taking our jobs and drug dealers, etc. So how to really address that and really unpack that as I move forward. But there's so many other cultural stereotypes out there that we're seeing today. And then the other one is monitor each other for unconscious bias. And I think that's the other piece is like find that friend you can fight in and have them for more or less like let you know when they see something come up within conversation or like course materials or emails or whatever it is, digital or in person. Because I would say it's almost easier to see it in other people than seeing it in yourself in real time. So if you have that good friend who is able to like monitor that and you're able to do that like a reciprocal kind of relationship, I think that's really helpful. Okay, so I want to go back to our pictures that we drew at the very beginning with the tree and the math equation. If you don't mind bringing those back, I'm going to get my video panel back too so I can see y'all. I want to see what you drew. So if you have a moment to come on camera and you can like, just show us your picture up to the camera. I would like to see what was drawn because I think this would be really helpful as we move forward. Okay. Thank you, Ronald. Yeah, let's maybe get like 2 or 3 examples so we can compare and contrast. Okay, Kristen, I see you.
Oh,
Oh,
Kristen, you
blurry
gotta
'cause
turn
we
off
don't have
your blurry.
Oh, I love that stone arch. That's cool. Okay, let's go ahead and see. We have Ronald's, we have Kristen's. Maybe we can get one more so we can get one more in the mix. Do we have one more friend who's willing to share? Okay, Jasmine, yes. Okay, Jasmine, Ronald, and Kristen, go ahead and hold them all up at the same time so we can compare and contrast. So I want y'all to see like the tree styles, what was drawn, the math equation, and what was given. What does your say secret code plus this week equals?
Hold on, don't say it. That's for the people that are
Oh,
here.
just kidding, just kidding. Oh. And then we have a music note, so some similar, some a little bit different, and then a tool. So we have like a wrench and a hammer, and a tool is
Kristen's coming straight from the
ChatGPT.
AI Institute, so
Oh, okay, digital tool.
ChatGPT is a tool, everyone.
So yeah, thank you all for sharing. And I want to show like this is a mental model. This is how we're approach the world. This is a moment of like, although I gave you the same directions, you all interpreted a little differently. Like I all said, draw a tree, and you drew the tree. And one was you have the math equation, and you each interpreted that equation very differently, which I thought was so cool. And even in my biased mind, I was like, oh, a physical tool, like, like a wrench or something. And I love how Christian threw in a digital tool, Chat GPT, and that was something that I wasn't even thinking about. That was like beyond my scope. And so I want to pose that question of what parts of your curriculum and or instruction come from your worldview? And when I say worldview, it's like how you've come to know the world around you, how you've come to know how to teach, how to do your specific skills in your trade, the technical way you move about your work, that is like influencing your worldview of what's right, what's wrong. And I want to show like, even though if I said draw a tool, like each of you drew a tool and all of those are valid and they all have their own specific use, which I thought was cool. So it's like not one tool, there's not one universal, I mean, there's some universal tools out there, but you know what I mean? Like, there's not one thing that can fix everything in the world. And there's not one tool to be a metaphor to be applied to every environment in your classroom. And I know that y'all are in different parts of Clover Park, and so different types of modes of teaching are necessary and required. So what might work in NOS will be very different of what works in Cosmo. So it's very important to learn from each other and get outside your worldview and say like, oh, I like what you're doing over there in construction. How can I use what the style you're using in construction and adapt it to what I'm doing over here in architecture? So there's some crossover. So I'm saying like, chat with people outside of your technical field and see what comes up. So yeah, I kind of want to use that metaphor of the drawing of that, the quick activity, but get a one layer deeper. So you can answer either question, I don't mind. So I have like what parts of your curriculum and or instruction come from your worldview? And then the other one is kind of a contrast, but how do you feel bias creeps into your classroom format, your materials, the content, engagement style, pedagogy, things like that. So I'm kind of, leaving that open. I want to see what y'all think.
And real quick, just to jump in, that second question is exactly what we're focusing on for the indicators this week. So if you think about that kind of stuff now, I think it will be helpful for completing the tasks for the indicators. I know if I were to just come in and start talking about the first one there, the parts of your curriculum, and sorry, Jasmine, if you want to go, you can go first. But the I do these conversation classes sometimes in through my university in Korea, and I get to choose whatever I want the discussion topics to be. And I usually do news articles. And so I usually pick the news articles that are most interesting to me. And I feel like I try to think about what's interesting for the students.
The unconscious.
But in the end, it's, I'm the person that's choosing um, what we're going to talk about. And I feel like that is based on, who I am and my history as a human being on this planet.
Yeah, thanks for that example. I think how we've approached, a news article or just information in this digital age, we have so much more access to different types of information, both like digital and print. Yeah. Jasmine, what were you thinking? I saw you came on camera.
I'm sorry, I turned on my camera by accident.
Oh, it's okay.
Well, you got the floor now.
Yeah, what do you think? All right, I see Kristen has in the chat. I think how I have approached the English language and what has been acceptable and not has been filled with bias. Yeah, so I mean, there's so many different ways of interpreting English and dialects of English. Yeah, Kelly, what are you thinking?
Um, I try to I teach IT security, so you cannot assume anything, no assumptions. But I try to play that into with my students and the groups of students and the different students I have. Day one, we really push that with our students. Don't assume anything. Don't assume a student may know something because you know. Don't assume a student may have something because you have it. And that's been a big push with the NOS program for the last, for quite a while, especially after COVID, because we got to see students who didn't have anything. They just didn't have it. So we had to come up with a loaner program to help them, equate to what other students have. But I think, trying to get students not to make assumptions on any scale is good.
And you're talking about access to technology and
Correct. Correct.
oh,
Well, yeah, absolutely. Even access to rides, access to transportation to get to school. It really opened our eyes to where our students were. It was a much broader situation than we realized, but it helped us to make adjustments and get them help. Um, and that's the norm today for us. And we really try our best to do that.
yeah, so I'm just gonna go ahead and flip back over. So what I'm like really hearing is like slowing down decision making and reconsidering reasons for decisions. That's
Right.
really what's
Right.
coming up for me when you're navigating this type of bias.
Yeah. One of the things we have a virtual desktop environment for students who initially we brought it on for students who did not have access to the equipment that we needed them to have access to. So we invested in that, and then we spread it wider to all students to make it the norm for everybody. But it really started out to give that equality to all our students, especially the ones that really didn't have much, and they wouldn't tell us either. I mean, trust me, we were losing students because of it, and then we made this adjustment, and we're now keeping those students.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's really positive approach, and I really like that example you shared with us. So yeah, thank you for your example today. That was I really appreciate that. Yeah, so I want to give you this kind of breakdown these four, and I think Kelly really touched on the top two, which is really nice because it shows that you can use more than one approach. Yeah, just use whatever type that fits your environment. One may work better than the other. So, okay, let me see. I think I had, oh yeah, this was just another like, I think pretty well-known test, but it's like the Harvard implicit bias test. I'm not going to go through it today, but you're more than welcome to explore it as on your own, or if you want to do it as part of your module. But it'll go through all these different categories. You can click on, any of these type of identities really and see like what does unconscious bias look like within age? What does unconscious bias look like within, the Asian identities, so or disability or whatever it may be. So that's one that you can use. It's one tool, it's not going to give you all of the answers, but it's one piece to heighten your awareness and be more conscious of who you are and how you approach your work. Some other pieces I had in here too. Yeah, these were some campaigns that I worked with PLU, which is our neighbor right on the other side of I-5. They have a couple different campaigns I worked on them with, which is My Language, My Choice, and just gonna copy these. Oh, well, I'll put them in the chat later after I take down my presentation. We have, one here that was talking about words and how I was talking about earlier, the association of words. So I want to share that resource. And then I also have the listen campaign that we worked on together. And there's different audio and video clips that are part of the listen campaign that is literally encouraging people to listen. I think it's comes, I don't want to say as simple, but like a really helpful skill to hone is active listening and really leaning into listening each other rather than jumping to conclusions or jumping to your response of what you might say and when somebody's talking. So I have the listening campaign as well. And then I have another episode, like a podcast episode that I can share with y'all. But I'm going to go ahead and close it out for today. I thought to just show this image because it shows 3 different people in 6 different outfits and just shows another way of how we might come to form bias based on appearance and associate that, maybe that with class or race or gender or economic status, whatever it may be. So as we move forward in the world, we have these associations ingrained in us. whether we like it or not, whether, from early childhood into adult life, we're going to keep making associations, and bias is going to creep up one way or another. And it's just a matter of how do we manage that? How do we check ourselves? And how do we, correct ourselves to have more of a positive approach in our teaching and in our learning and just in life in general outside of Clover Park. So yeah, thank you all so much for allowing me to be here. Just want to go ahead and pause here if there's any questions or anything like that that you might have. And I'm just going to go ahead and pop these other pieces in the chat.
Thank you, Luke. It was really nice to listen to you today and what you had to say. Yeah, lots of good things to think about. Check yourself before you do stuff. So let me share my screen now, and then yeah, thank you for those links as well. I'm gonna put those into the resources page for standard 1.2. I'll probably put them into standard 1.2 B and C because those are the ones that were specifically about bias. I know we only have a couple minutes left, and actually no, I was going to ask you a question that we were talking about from last week, but maybe I'll talk to you sometime this week, Luke, about it, and then if we're lucky, maybe we can have you come again to talk about representation, because some people were asking last time about if we're changing our course and we're adding all the positive representation and showing people from all different backgrounds and all walks of life doing all these things in whatever position you're in. What happens when you go into the actual workforce and it's not like that? So, like I said, we'll talk about that later. For everybody that's in here today, indicators 1.2A to 1.2C are the ones that you should be working on this week. And once again, they're the same format as usual. You have your assignment and your different ways that you could do these assignments. Are there any questions before we end our time here today?
Are you going to give out the secret code?
I did. Did I not send it to you in the message? I'll send you on the message real quick, okay?
Oh, I didn't even.
Check the chat, and if it's not, oh no, it is there. So check the chat. It should be in there. I did it a little differently today. Well, I'm not going to say what I did.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. If there's no questions, thank you again, Luke. And then thank you all for coming here on this Friday. We appreciate you taking the time to do the work. And we'll see you all next week.
Take care. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Kelly.
Ronald, I know I came in late, so when I watch the recording, will there be a way for me to get the code?
There is. It's in hold on, let me see.